Morning, everyone. um, we're starting off the week here on a Tuesday. Yesterday I didn't do the market update in the morning because there was just like super heavy construction here, and it was just like you couldn't hear anything. Like nothing was like legible. It was going to be just a farce. Everyone would have been complaining anyway. So it's Tuesday, November 5th, right? It is election day. It is one of the biggest events, one of the biggest uncertain events that we have been waiting for as traders going into this. As investors alike, right? It's a huge event to wrap up the year, right? Along with that, we have the FOMC that comes out this week. But I did post a video this weekend talking about the election and my anticipated movement and what to kind of expect from the election in terms of the market movement. And today is going to be that day. So today into the evening session, we are going to see the election results start trickling in as the market is going to be open, right? The futures market is going to be open. So I'm going to be talking a little more about how I plan to kind of look at these things and look at this market as a whole in terms of opportunity on today's session. So not only today, there is most likely going to be kind of like slower movement and slower volatility during the RTH itself. And I wouldn't say that it's super advisable for everyone to be waiting for the election to trade the evening session. Now, I'll be breaking down a few different aspects that I think are important to understand today, but one of the main constructs and concepts about this election and about what's going on in terms of the market and the market opportunity is that everyone's going to look at this as like a massive potential for opportunity, right? They're going to be looking at this, there's going to be volatility, there's going to be movement, there's going to be a huge chance to make a lot of money based on this election. Now, you also have to look at it from the other perspective where there's high uncertainty, volatility is most likely going to be high, and you can get slapped around, so it's a double-edged sword naturally, and you don't necessarily want to dig yourself into a deeper hole because there's still the uncertainty that we're actually going to get a result by the end of tonight as well. So it was in 2020, the last elections, we saw that we didn't get a very definitive answer until a few days after the actual election. And the overnight session, that election trading period, wasn't anything that insane realistically. It wasn't anything crazy in terms of market movement. That crazier market movement happened days prior. So I'd be very cautious trading today, trading tonight, and making sure that you're not digging yourself into a deeper hole by understanding where those key areas are, where you want to trade, and being very selective based on these balances, based on these levels. Something that I highlighted throughout the video that I had posted on the weekend, right? And also, I also pasted a lot of information on Discord that you guys can see. Now, we're coming into a very decisive day, right? Who's going to be the next president in the States? Who's going to take place? And a lot of eyes are going to be on the swing states at play, like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. It seems like it's likely that about half of the voters have already cast their votes via mail or early in-person voting. Many of those 81 million ballots can only be tabulated by the election officials on the election day or after the polls are closed tonight. And simply looking at the expectations of the markets, not even from a day-to-day perspective, looking at it from an overall perspective, I think this is one big thing that people have to understand. The uncertainty, the main uncertainty from this election is not who is going to win realistically, immediately is what I'm trying to say. The main uncertainty comes from whether we're going to get the decisive answer by the end of the night or is it going to take a few days. That kind of uncertainty is most likely going to present some kind of downside and volatility into the market leading up into when there's a factual answer that's ready for us, whether it's now or whether it's later. The sooner that we can get this election settled, the sooner that the market can start moving towards the upside. Otherwise, that period in between can be a little more volatile and most likely is going to present some kind of downside momentum. Now, the other factor that I think everyone needs to understand is that, yes, there are certain sectors that are generally expected to do better than others. Now, I say that in air quotes because it doesn't necessarily always work that way. I think one of the bigger expectations is that people have to understand that generally after presidential elections, regardless of who the winner is, the market is in a favorable standpoint, meaning that the market likes to move towards the upside for an end of year rally situation. Now, when that kind of blows over and we go into 2025, that's when you can start looking at this from the perspective of like, okay, which candidate has won? What are the potentials for the strength of the market versus like weakness? Now, I think both results are going to be the same, right? They're going to result in the same market reaction. It's just how do we get to that endpoint, which might be a little different. So I think they're both going to result in upside momentum into the end of the year. I think they're both going to result in some kind of upside momentum into Q1 2025. But the question is, how can we get there, and how does that movement look like? Now, probably with a blue wind, there's going to be a little more downside and a pretty stern spike up versus a red wind where we're most likely going to gradually go up. Those are my thoughts. Now, if we take a look at the sectors, right, or individual stocks that may benefit from one party's platform, it may be more akin to gambling, right? It doesn't necessarily always reflect the reality of how returns actually play out. One of the recent examples is oil and gas versus green energy. Under the Trump and Biden administrations, the S&P Global Clean Energy Index soared under the Trump administration, and the S&P energy sector also languished even before the COVID pandemic, while the exact opposite happened during Biden's term in office despite his policies. So besides diversification, a better approach may be to zoom out into the overall market, especially given the outsized returns that we've seen in major indices under both recent administrations. Realistically, the S&P 500 has hit 47 record highs this year, right? It hit the 47 one just a few weeks ago. So keeping the bull market very, very intact. Now, it might also just be as important to look at the past election hype and areas that will be in high demand regardless of who is sitting in Washington, such as AI and military hardware, right? Those are some of the big factors that we have to understand. Now, if the election itch is a little too much, it might be wise to increase exposure investments to investments that are likely to perform well under any administration. So realistically, I'm honestly looking at even tech, right? I think that tech might be one of those industries that does fairly well regardless, but taking more of a delayed approach in that. There are a lot of things to consider, right? I think that overall today is probably going to be a slower day. As it is going to be a slower day, I feel like we're going to have, more of a wider range that plays out. I don't necessarily anticipate markets expanding too much outside of a range leading into the election that's tonight, right? What I mean by that is like we're inside of a big balance right now on the S&P 500. On the overnight session, we've held the lows really well towards that balance low around that 57.35, which was an area that I was trying to hunt for that long on the overnight. And then the top end of the balance is 58, like 05, 5800. I think that generally intact, we're intact for this balance, as well as probably leaning a little more to the downside, where I'd probably expect to see 57.70 area try to hold out yet again. I think it might be a little harder for the downside to actually open up under the auction low, but it is a fairly decent, I guess like a higher probability, like more of an expectation rather than us just like swinging to the upside today. So I'm mainly just going to go into the market with like very little expectations, assuming that we're just going to chop and move sideways, with the idea that I only want to play massive extremes, meaning I want to see what happens at 57.35 and potentially at 5800. Everything in between, you start decreasing the probability of a good trade, especially going into a period of uncertainty and volatility that happens in tonight's session. So let's see how it shapes up, right? I'm gonna open up our live trading room if there's gonna be any kind of opportunity, great. But I'm gonna be looking forward to trading this election on Voice and Discord into the end of tonight, right? So we'll be in Discord. Come check us out. Come check us out at community.tradeproacademy.com, and I'll see you guys in there. And we'll do an update tomorrow. See what kind of news that we get. What do we get updated tomorrow, right? That's gonna be a pretty big factor. So everyone, thank you and take care, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's trading session after the election.